Family isn't just blood and obligation. It's respect. It's seeing each other clearly. If they can't do that, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is show them what they've taken for granted. I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who would cancel her daughter's trust fund. I was the woman who packed heart-shaped notes in lunchboxes, who stayed up until 3 a.m. finishing science fair projects, who worked 3 jobs so my daughter could take piano lessons. I was the perpetual giver, the eternal supporter, the safety net that never failed. Until the day my daughter Sarah decided I wasn't good enough to be seen at her wedding. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Elaine Michaels. For 27 years, I defined myself primarily as Sarah's mother. Even after my husband Richard's car skidded off an icy bridge when Sarah was just 9 years old, I never faltered in that role. While grieving, I smiled through her school plays. While struggling to make mortgage payments, I found money for her dance recital costumes. While watching other women rebuild their lives with new partners, I poured my every waking hour into creating opportunities for her. Teaching English at Westlake High School never made me wealthy, but I was clever with money, something I'd learned from my grandmother who raised 7 children during the Depression. The modest life insurance policy Richard left became the seed of Sarah's trust fund. I added to it religiously, birthday checks from my parents, the small inheritance when my uncle passed, overtime pay from summer school sessions, the royalties from a textbook I co-authored. "Mom, you should spend some of that on yourself," Sarah would sometimes say during her college breaks, watching me clip coupons at the kitchen table. "Take a vacation or something." I'd just smile and say, "There'll be time for that later. Your future comes first." The small 3-bedroom colonial in Lakeside, Connecticut wasn't fancy, but it was a stable home in a good school district. I tended a vegetable garden in the backyard, painted the shutters myself every 5 years, and kept everything immaculate. Not because I was naturally tidy, but because I wanted Sarah to be proud of where she came from. Sarah bloomed under my devotion. She graduated as valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to Wellesley, and landed her dream internship at a glossy magazine in Manhattan. I framed every achievement, kept a scrapbook of every milestone. When she decided to stay in New York after college, landing an assistant editor position at Lux Media, I fought back my loneliness and celebrated her independence. "You've built an amazing foundation for her," my friend Diane told me over coffee one Saturday. "She's going to soar." "That was always the plan," I said, ignoring the empty echo in my house. Our Sunday night phone calls were my anchor. She'd tell me about glamorous launch parties, the celebrities she'd spotted in Greenwich Village, the challenges of city living. I'd share quieter news, the progress of my garden, neighborhood gossip, funny stories from my classroom. I lived vicariously through her exciting life while she maintained a tether to her roots. The first sign that something had shifted came 3 years into her New York life. Our calls became shorter, more perfunctory. "Can't talk long, Mom," became her standard greeting. When I asked about her work, her answers grew vague. When I suggested visiting, there was always some reason why that weekend wouldn't work. "It's normal," my sister Janet assured me. "She's finding her independence." Remember how we were with Mom? But it felt different than normal separation. There was something in Sarah's voice, a new tone that sounded suspiciously like embarrassment. Then came Daniel. The first I heard of him was in a rushed call. "Mom, I've met someone. It's getting serious." "That's wonderful, honey. Tell me all about him," I said, curling up on the sofa, ready for the kind of lengthy girl talk we used to enjoy. "Not much to tell. He's in finance. Listen, I've got to run. We're meeting friends for dinner." For 3 months, that was all I knew. Daniel, finance, serious. No details about his family, his interests, how they'd met. When I asked, Sarah deflected with practiced ease. My opportunity for answers came unexpectedly. My school's debate team had reached the state finals in Manhattan, and as faculty advisor, I'd be accompanying them. I called Sarah with the news. "I'll be in your neighborhood next Friday. The competition ends at 4, so I thought we could have dinner. Maybe Daniel could join us?" The silence stretched for several seconds before Sarah responded. "Mom, that's not really. I mean, Daniel's schedule is unpredictable, and I've got this deadline." "Just dinner, Sarah. I've been wanting to meet him for months." More silence, then a resigned sigh. "Okay. There's a place called Westside Bistro on 73rd. It's convenient. Let's say 6:30. I spent foolish amounts of time preparing for that dinner. Had my hair freshly colored to cover the emerging gray, bought a new blouse I couldn't really afford, practiced contemporary conversation topics so I wouldn't seem provincial. The restaurant was more upscale than I'd anticipated. I gave the hostess Sarah's name and was led to a corner table where my daughter sat with a man who looked like he'd stepped from the pages of a menswear catalog. His tailored suit probably cost more than 3 of my mortgage payments. "Mom," Sarah said, standing for a brief, stiff hug. "This is Daniel Harrington. Daniel, my mother, Elaine Michaels." Daniel stood and shook my hand with practiced charm. "Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Michaels. Sarah's mentioned you teach, is that right?" His smile didn't reach his eyes, which were already assessing my department store outfit and sensible shoes. "Yes, high school English. For almost 20 years now." "Admirable dedication," he said, with the tone one might use to commend someone for surviving a natural disaster. Throughout dinner, I watched Sarah transform into someone I barely recognized. She laughed too loudly at Daniel's mundane observations, touched his arm constantly, and repeatedly referenced people and places that excluded me from the conversation. "You remember Isabella from the Vandermont Gala, don't you, darling? We simply must take your mother to Bellini's while she's here, though it's impossible to get a reservation on short notice, of course." I noticed how she carefully steered the conversation away from her childhood, our modest home, family vacations at the lake instead of Europe. When Daniel excused himself to take a call, I leaned forward. "He seems successful," I offered, trying to find neutral ground. Sarah's smile tightened. "His family owns 3 investment firms. They have houses in the Hamptons, Aspen, and Paris." "That's nice. He seems—" "Mom," she interrupted, her voice low and intense. "Please don't tell stories about my awkward phase or how I used to dress up the cat, okay? And maybe don't mention that you shop at outlets or that you still live in the same house. Daniel's family is very particular about backgrounds." The words struck me like small, precise arrows. "You're ashamed of me," I said, the revelation settling cold and heavy in my stomach. "I'm not ashamed. I'm just—" Sarah glanced toward the restrooms where Daniel had disappeared. "These people judge everything, Mom. Where you vacation, which schools you attended, what your parents do. I've worked so hard to fit in." "By pretending to be someone you're not? Someone I didn't raise you to be?" Sarah's eyes flashed with a mixture of guilt and defiance. "You always taught me to reach for more. That's all I'm doing. I taught you to be authentic and kind, to value people for their character, not their pedigree." Daniel returned before she could respond, and the evening continued in a haze of polite conversation that felt like wading through quicksand. When we parted, Sarah's hug was perfunctory. "Let's have lunch tomorrow, just us," I suggested. "I can't. Meetings all day. But I'll call soon, okay? Safe trip back." I returned to my hotel room and cried for the first time since Richard's funeral. Something precious was slipping away, and I didn't know how to hold on to it. 2 months passed with only brief, superficial calls. Then came the evening Sarah FaceTimed me, her left hand prominently displayed to showcase an enormous diamond ring. "Daniel proposed. she announced, beaming. "We're getting married in June at the Larchmont Pavilion." Despite my misgivings about what Sarah was becoming, maternal joy surged through me. My little girl, getting married. A chance to heal the growing distance between us. "That's wonderful news, honey. I'm so happy for you. We should start planning right away. I've been saving ideas since you were little." Sarah's smile dimmed slightly. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Actually, Mom, Daniel's mother has already hired Imogen Wade to plan everything. She's done weddings for actual royalty." "Oh, well, I'd still love to help. Mother-daughter dress shopping is such a tradition and—" "The thing is," Sarah interrupted, gently, "we're going with a very specific aesthetic. Imogen has relationships with designers that can achieve the look we want." Each offer I made, to address invitations, arrange flowers, compile a photo montage, was politely but firmly declined. Over the following weeks, I received occasional updates that made it clear the wedding was being orchestrated without any input from me. I learned about venue changes, menu selections, and ceremony details through Sarah's social media rather than from my daughter directly. The final blow came via email, not even a phone call. A message from the wedding planner with "Logistics for Mother of the Bride" in the subject line. "Dear Ms. Michaels, as we finalize arrangements for Sarah and Daniel's celebration, I wanted to confirm the following details. 1. You will be seated at table 7 with Daniel's mother's college roommate and several family friends of the Harringtons. 2. The professional Mother of the Bride styling session has been scheduled for 9 a.m. at Vogue Salon. Please note that Sarah and Mrs. Harrington have pre-approved suitable options for your attire. 3. Due to time constraints, the traditional Mother of the Bride speech has been removed from the program. However, you are welcome to submit a written sentiment that may be included in the dinner menus if space allows. 4. For arrival, please, use the north entrance of the pavilion, near the service area, as the main entrance will be quite congested with photography setups for the principal wedding party. The email continued with more logistics, each one stripping away another layer of my maternal role until I was reduced to little more than a prop in my only daughter's wedding, a potentially embarrassing prop at that, to be styled, scripted, and sidelined. That night, I opened a bottle of wine Richard and I had been saving for a special occasion and took it out to the back porch. The trust fund documents sat on the table beside me, illuminated by the porch light and the nearly full moon. 27. Years of sacrifice, of choosing Sarah's future over my own present, bound in a neat legal folder. I thought about the trips not taken, the master's degree not pursued, the hobbies abandoned, the relationships not explored, all the pieces of myself I'd set aside to be the mother Sarah needed. I'd never regretted those choices until now, sitting alone on my porch, realizing that the daughter I'd given everything for wanted to hide me away at her wedding because I was a high school teacher who shopped at outlet malls and lived in a modest house. The next morning, I called my financial advisor, Michael, and my attorney, Teresa. I need to make some changes, I told them both. Over the following weeks, I methodically dismantled the structure of support I'd built around Sarah. The trust fund was dissolved and redistributed, partly into a foundation providing college scholarships for students from Westlake High, partly into a retirement account for myself, and partly into a separate account that would remain untouched for now. A small insurance policy against future regret, perhaps. Teresa, my attorney, raised an eyebrow when I explained what I wanted to do. Are you certain about this, Elaine? This is a significant change after so many years of planning. I've never been more certain of anything, I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions beneath the surface. May I ask why? You've been adding to this fund since Sarah was a child. I considered deflecting the question, but Teresa had been both my attorney and friend for nearly 2 decades. She deserved honesty. Because I finally realized that while I've been investing in Sarah's future, I've forgotten to invest in my own present. And because the daughter I raised would never treat someone the way I'm being treated now. Teresa nodded slowly. I understand. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. After signing the final documents, I felt a curious lightness walking back to my car. It wasn't happiness exactly. There was too much grief for that, but something adjacent to freedom. For the first time in 27 years, I was making decisions based solely on what I believed was right, not on what would benefit Sarah. That evening, I walked through my house with new eyes. The colonial that had seemed perfectly adequate for raising a child now felt like a repository of memories rather than a home for my current self. The bedroom I'd never redecorated after Richard died. The formal dining room I used twice a year at most. The carefully preserved Sarah's room that my daughter hadn't slept in for nearly a decade. On impulse, I went into Sarah's old room and began emptying the closet. High school yearbooks, prom dresses, childhood stuffed animals. All the artifacts I'd preserved as if in a museum. I didn't discard them, but I did relocate them to storage. Containers in the attic. By midnight, I had stripped the room of its shrine-like quality and stood in the center, envisioning something new. Perhaps a reading nook, or a home office where I could finally write that novel I'd been thinking about since graduate school. The ringing of my phone interrupted my thoughts. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, an unusual occurrence at this hour. Mom? Her voice held an unfamiliar tension. Are you awake? I am. Is everything okay? Not really. Daniel and I just had a huge fight with his parents about the wedding. A small, petty part of me wanted to respond with, "Oh? I wasn't aware I was allowed to have opinions about your wedding." Instead, I asked, "What happened?" They're being completely unreasonable about the guest list. They want to invite all these business associates and distant relatives we barely know, and the venue can only accommodate so many people. That sounds frustrating. It is. And now they're threatening to cut Daniel's trust fund payments if we don't do things their way. She paused meaningfully. Which makes me really grateful that I have you, Mom. I know you'd never use money to control me like that. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. What does Daniel say about all this? He's caught in the middle. He wants to stand up to them, but they've always had this power over him. It's like they dangle financial security as a way to make him comply with whatever they want. I closed my eyes, wondering if Sarah heard herself. That must be difficult for both of you. It is, especially now with the house situation. And there it was, the real reason for her late-night call. What house situation? I asked, though I already knew where this was headed. We found this amazing brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. It needs some work, but the location is perfect, and it's actually within our price range if we have help with the down payment. Daniel was counting on his parents, but after tonight. You're wondering about accessing your trust fund early. Could we? Just for the down payment? We're pre-approved for the mortgage, but we need to move quickly. The market's so competitive. That's a significant request, Sarah. We should talk about it in person. There's no time for that, Mom. We need to make an offer by Friday. Real estate decisions shouldn't be rushed. If it's meant to be your home, a few days to discuss things properly won't change that. But come home this weekend. We'll go over everything together. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah agreed, though I could hear the impatience in her voice. She'd grown accustomed to getting what she wanted with minimal resistance from me. The weekend arrived with a springtime rain that rendered my garden lush and fragrant. I spent Saturday morning preparing Sarah's favorite foods: blueberry pancakes for breakfast, chicken salad with grapes and walnuts for lunch, as if good food might somehow bridge the growing chasm between us. Sarah arrived just before noon, stepping out of a sleek black Audi that must have been Daniel's. She wore designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, and the slightly impatient expression of someone with more important places to be. "The house looks exactly the same," she remarked, as she entered, kissing my cheek perfunctorily. "Why would it change? It's only been a few months since your last visit." "I just mean it's so consistent. Doesn't that get boring?" I bit back a retort about the value of stability and led her into the kitchen where lunch was waiting. For a few minutes, we engaged in the type of surface-level conversation that had become our norm. Her complimenting the food, me asking about her work, both of us carefully avoiding anything substantive. Finally, Sarah set down her fork and fixed me with a direct gaze. "So, about the trust fund. Can we access it now for the down payment? The brownstone really is perfect, Mom. 4 bedrooms, a garden terrace, all original moldings." "Why 4 bedrooms? That seems like a lot for just you and Daniel." "Well, we'll use one as a home office and one for guests. And eventually." She twisted her engagement ring. "I mean, we're not planning on children right away, but someday." I nodded, trying to imagine Sarah as a mother, wondering if parenthood would reshape her priorities the way it had mine. "The thing about the trust fund," I began carefully, "is that it was established with certain conditions and timeframes. But you're the trustee. You can change those conditions, right?" "I could, yes, but before we discuss that, I'd like to talk about something else." Sarah's expression shifted from expectant to wary. "What?" "Your wedding, specifically my role in it, or lack thereof." She sighed dramatically. "Mom, please don't start. Everything is being handled professionally. It's not personal." "It feels very personal to be told I should enter through a service entrance, that I need professional styling to look acceptable, and that my speech isn't welcome at my only daughter's wedding. Those are just logistical decisions. The north entrance is closer to where you'll be seated. The styling is a perk, not an insult, and the schedule is just too tight for lots of speeches." "Sarah," I said gently, "do you honestly believe that? Or are you repeating what you've been told to make yourself feel better about these choices?" Her cheeks flushed. "Why are you being so difficult? This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life, and you're making it about you." "I'm not trying to make it about me. I'm trying to understand why my daughter, who I raised to be kind and inclusive, is suddenly comfortable excluding me from meaningful participation in her wedding." "I'm not excluding you. You're invited, aren't you?" "As what? A properly dressed prop who enters through the back and sits with strangers? That's not inclusion, Sarah. That's tolerance. Barely." Sarah pushed her plate away, appetite apparently gone. "I don't understand why you can't just be happy for me. Daniel's family moves in important circles. They have expectations about how things should be done. And those expectations include hiding away your mother because she's a public school teacher who doesn't fit their idea of success." "Nobody's hiding you," she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. "Then let me ask you this. If Daniel's mother was a teacher instead of a socialite, would she be entering through the north entrance? Would she be seated at table 7 with strangers?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. "I've spent my entire adult life putting you first," I continued, my voice softer now. "Working extra jobs to pay for dance lessons and SAT prep, passing on opportunities so I could be at every recital and game. And I never regretted any of it, because I believed I was raising a daughter who valued people for their character, not their social standing or bank accounts." "I do value people," Sarah insisted, though her conviction seemed to waver. "This is different. This is just how things are done in Daniel's world. And you've decided that's your world now, even if it means diminishing your relationship with me." "I'm not diminishing anything. God, why do you have to be so dramatic? I just want a beautiful wedding and a nice house. What's wrong with that?" "Nothing. But there's something wrong with treating the person who sacrificed everything for you as if they're an embarrassment to be managed." Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I can't have this conversation right now. Either you'll help us with the down payment or you won't. Just let me know by Tuesday. As she gathered her purse and jacket, I remained seated, a strange calm settling over me. The trust fund no longer exists, Sarah. She froze, one arm in her jacket sleeve. What? I dissolved it last month and redistributed the funds. The shock on her face quickly morphed into disbelief, then anger. You can't do that. That money was for me. It was a gift I intended to give you under certain conditions, primarily that you would become the kind of person who deserved it. What is that supposed to mean? I graduated with honors. I have a good job. I'm marrying into a respected family. What more do you want from me? Basic decency, respect for the woman who raised you, recognition that worth isn't measured by social status or wealth. Sarah's face contorted with rage. You did this to punish me for the wedding arrangements, didn't you? How petty can you be? This isn't about punishment, Sarah. It's about finally seeing clearly. The daughter I've been saving for all these years doesn't exist anymore. She's been replaced by someone who values status over sincerity and appearances over authenticity. You had no right, she hissed, tears of frustration forming in her eyes. That money was promised to me. Actually, I had every right. The trust was always conditional on my discretion as trustee. Perhaps you should have read the fine print instead of taking my support for granted. Sarah grabbed her keys, hands, shaking with anger. Daniel was right about you. He said you were manipulative and controlling beneath all that self-sacrificing mother routine. I defended you, but he was right all along. The words stung, but I maintained my composure. Is that what Daniel thinks? Or what his parents have convinced both of you to think, because I won't quietly hand over money while being relegated to the background of your life? I'm done with this conversation, and maybe I'm done with you. As she stormed toward the door, I called after her, my voice steady despite the pain constricting my chest. Sarah, the trust fund isn't completely gone. Part of it has been placed in a separate account. She paused, hand on the doorknob, not turning around. Whether you ever see that money depends entirely on what kind of person you choose to become. From this point forward. She left without another word, the door slamming behind her with a finality that echoed through the house. I remained at the kitchen table, surrounded by the remains of our uneaten lunch, wondering if I'd just lost my daughter forever, and whether the woman she'd become was truly the daughter I'd raised. The week that followed was deafening in its silence. No calls from Sarah, no messages, no communication of any kind. I moved through my days in a strange state of grief and liberation. Grief for the relationship that seemed irreparably damaged, liberation from the weight of perpetual self-sacrifice. On Wednesday, I received a formal email from Imogen Wade, the wedding planner. Dear Ms. Michaels, in light of recent developments, Sarah and Daniel have asked me to inform you that the wedding arrangements have been adjusted. Please disregard previous communications about your role in the ceremony and reception. Your presence at the wedding is, of course, still welcome should you wish to attend as a guest. Please RSVP at your earliest convenience. Regards, Imogen Wade. I read the message 3 times, trying to decipher its meaning through the weird, sterile professional language, demoted from mother of the bride to generic guest. It was the clearest statement yet of where I stood in Sarah's new life. I didn't respond to the email. Instead, I drove to school and threw myself into end-of-year activities with my students. We were studying King Lear, and the parallels to my own situation weren't lost on me. A parent who gave everything, only to be cast aside when their usefulness had ended. Though unlike Lear, I'd recognized the betrayal before it was too late, and I'd taken steps to protect myself. On Friday afternoon, as I was grading papers in my classroom, my phone lit up with a name I didn't expect. Daniel Harrington. Ms. Michaels, he began when I answered, his tone clipped but controlled. I think we need to have a conversation. About what, Daniel? About this situation with Sarah's trust fund. There seems to be some misunderstanding that's causing unnecessary tension. There's no misunderstanding. I've been quite clear about my decisions and my reasons. Perhaps we could discuss this in person? I'm actually in Lakeside for a meeting and could stop by your home this evening. The request surprised me. Daniel had always seemed content to let Sarah manage the mom situation, as I imagined he thought of me. That won't be necessary, I replied. Anything you have to say can be said over the phone. I prefer to handle important matters face to face. His voice took on a cajoling tone I recognized from businessmen used to getting their way. I'm sure we can reach a mutually beneficial arrangement if we just talk things through. Something in his phrasing set off warning bells. Mutually beneficial arrangement? This isn't a business negotiation, Daniel. It's a family matter. Of course. Poor choice of words. I simply meant that I'm sure we both want what's best for Sarah. On that, at least, we agree, though we might differ on what best means. After a pause, he continued, his voice lower, more intimate, as if sharing a confidence. Look, I understand you're upset about the wedding plans, but you have to understand, my parents are very traditional about these things. There are certain appearances to maintain, certain protocols to follow. And those protocols include treating the mother of the bride as an embarrassing inconvenience? That's not how we see it at all. The smoothness of his denial only confirmed its falseness. It's simply about presenting a cohesive aesthetic for the event. My mother has been planning this wedding for years. Your mother has been planning my daughter's wedding for years. He backpedaled quickly. Figure of speech. I just meant she has very specific ideas about how these social occasions should be conducted. I see. And do her specific ideas include my daughter lying to me about why she wants access to her trust fund? Because Sarah mentioned nothing about your parents refusing to help with the down payment on that brownstone. A telling silence stretched between us. Financial matters between myself and my parents are complicated, he finally said. Indeed, as are financial matters between myself and my daughter, which is why I'd appreciate if you'd stay out of them. Ms. Michaels, Daniel's voice hardened slightly, the veneer of charm cracking. Sarah is very upset about this situation. She feels betrayed. I'm familiar with that feeling. Is there nothing I can say to change your mind? No compromise we can reach? My decision regarding the trust fund is final, Daniel. But please tell Sarah that my door remains open whenever she's ready to have an honest conversation about our relationship. After ending the call, I sat in my empty classroom, surrounded by the earnest essays of teenagers who were still figuring out who they wanted to be in the world. I wondered when Sarah had decided who she wanted to be, and why. She'd chosen a version of herself that had no place for the mother who'd raised her. That evening, as I worked in my newly repurposed home office, formerly Sarah's room, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and a quick glance at the clock, nearly 9 p.m., made the visit even more unusual. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel standing on my porch, his perfectly tailored suit looking oddly out of place in my modest neighborhood. After a moment's hesitation, I opened the door. Daniel, I believe I was clear that a visit wasn't necessary. His smile was practiced, confident. I was in the area and thought a face-to-face conversation might be more productive. May I come in? Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. He entered with the casual entitlement of someone accustomed to having doors opened for him. Both. Literally and figuratively. Lovely home, he remarked, his gaze sweeping over my living room in what seemed like assessment rather than appreciation. Very cozy. What can I do for you, Daniel? It's getting late. Right to business. I appreciate that. He perched on the edge of my sofa, maintaining perfect posture. I've come with a proposal. one that I believe addresses your concerns, while still allowing Sarah to receive the financial support she's counting on. I'm listening. Sarah tells me that the trust fund was quite substantial, enough for a down payment on the brownstone with some left over. What if we used only a portion for the house? The remainder could be held in reserve until after the wedding. And what would accessing this money be contingent upon? Daniel spread his hands in a gesture of openness. Simply a more cohesive family situation. I understand you feel excluded from the wedding planning. We can certainly make adjustments. What sort of adjustments? Well, for starters, you could be seated at the family table rather than with guests. And perhaps you could give a brief toast. Very brief, of course, given the tight schedule. And the north entrance? The mandatory styling session? He waved. A dismissive hand. Details that can be reconsidered. The important thing is finding a path forward that satisfies everyone. I studied him carefully, noting the calculated sincerity in his expression. So to clarify, in exchange for me reinstating Sarah's trust fund, I would receive the honor of being treated like the mother of the bride at my daughter's wedding? Precisely. He smiled, apparently missing the irony in my tone. A reasonable compromise, wouldn't you say? And this was Sarah's idea? This? Negotiation? A flicker of hesitation crossed his face. We discussed it together. She's very upset, as you can imagine. So upset she sent you here instead of coming herself? She's emotional right now. I thought a more rational approach might be productive. I nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. Daniel, let me ask you something. Did your parents really refuse to help with the down payment on the brownstone? His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. As I mentioned, financial matters with my family are complex. That's not an answer. After a moment, he sighed. My parents offered to help, yes, but with conditions I found unacceptable. Such as? They wanted ownership stake in the property, typical controlling behavior disguised as generosity. A hint of genuine emotion colored his voice for the first time. I've been dealing with their manipulation my entire life. I refuse to let them use this house as another way to maintain control over me. So you thought you'd access Sarah's trust fund instead? Money with no strings attached. It's different. Sarah's trust fund was always intended for her future. My parents dangle money as a way to dictate my choices. The irony of his statement hung in the air between us. Daniel, I said carefully, do you love my daughter? The question seemed to startle him. Of course I do. Why would you ask that? Because I've been watching how this relationship has changed her, how she's altered herself to fit into your world, even if it means disconnecting from her past, from me. That's not fair. Sarah's simply growing, evolving into a more sophisticated version of herself. Is that what you call it? Because from where I sit, it looks like she's abandoning everything that made her uniquely Sarah in order to become an acceptable appendage to your life. His jaw tightened. You don't understand our world, Ms. Michaels. There are certain expectations, certain standards. Oh, I understand perfectly. I understand that my daughter is being molded into someone who values status over sincerity, who would enter her own wedding through the front door while sending her mother through the service entrance. You're misinterpreting, am I? Then let me ask you this. If Sarah had no trust fund, if she was simply a magazine editor with no financial assets beyond her salary, would you still be planning to marry her? Would your parents still be hosting this extravagant wedding? Daniel stood abruptly, his facade of charm completely evaporated. I didn't come here to be insulted or to have my relationship questioned. No, you came here to negotiate the price of treating me with basic respect at my daughter's wedding. And in doing so, you've told me everything I need to know about the man my daughter has chosen. This conversation is clearly pointless. He moved toward the door, then turned. back, his expression hardened. "You should know that Sarah is prepared to cut ties completely if you persist with this financial manipulation." "That would break my heart," I admitted, my voice catching slightly. "But I would rather lose my daughter to honesty than keep her through capitulation." After Daniel left, I sat alone in my living room, the silence of the house pressing in around me. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider the real possibility that Sarah might actually follow through on Daniel's threat, that my principled stand might cost me my only child. The thought sent a wave of panic through me, followed by a moment of doubt. Was I being too harsh? Too judgmental? Was I punishing Sarah for simply wanting a different life than the one I'd envisioned for her? I went to my desk and opened the folder containing the documents Teresa had prepared. The trust fund hadn't been completely dissolved. About a third of it had been placed in a separate account that could be reinstated under certain conditions. Conditions that had nothing to do with where I sat at a wedding or which entrance I used, but everything to do with the kind of person Sarah chose to be. My finger hovered over my phone. I could call her, try to explain again. But what would I say that I hadn't already said? How could I make her understand that this wasn't about money, but about values? About recognizing when you're becoming someone you never intended to be? In the end, I didn't call. Instead, I wrote a letter. An actual handwritten letter on stationery, not an email or text. I poured out my heart without accusation or ultimatum. I told Sarah what I'd seen happening to her over the past year, how she'd begun to change in ways that concerned me. I shared memories of the values we'd discussed when she was growing up: kindness, authenticity, treating others with dignity regardless of their status. I expressed my fears about the path she was on, not because I disapproved of her ambition or her relationship itself, but because I recognized the pattern of someone slowly being separated from their true self. I ended with this: "The money was never the point, Sarah. It was only ever a means to give you freedom. Freedom to become your best self, to make choices based on your values rather than necessity. If your best self truly includes treating your mother as someone to be hidden away, if your values now align with measuring people by their social status rather than their character, then perhaps the trust fund has already failed in its purpose. My door remains open, not for negotiations or transactions, but for real conversation whenever you're ready. I love you, not the polished version you present to Daniel's world, but the authentic, complicated, wonderful person you've always been. Mom." I mailed the letter the next morning, uncertain if Sarah would even read it. Then I turned my attention back to reclaiming the parts of myself I'd set aside for so long. I signed up for a summer writing workshop at the local college. I accepted a dinner invitation from James, my colleague who'd been asking me out for years. I began researching graduate programs in creative writing, something I'd abandoned when Sarah was young and money was tight. The days passed without word from Sarah. The wedding date grew closer. I received no further communications from the wedding planner, no revised invitation, nothing to indicate whether I was still welcome to attend even as a generic guest. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "My parents think I'm at a dress fitting. Can we meet? Somewhere private. S." We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop in a neighboring town, far from any of Sarah's usual haunts. I arrived early, unsure what to expect. My stomach twisted with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Sarah entered wearing oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low, as if attempting to be incognito. She looked younger somehow, more vulnerable, more like the daughter I remembered. "Thanks for coming," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I got your letter. I wasn't sure you would read it." "I almost didn't." She twisted her engagement ring nervously. "Daniel said I should just ignore it. That you were trying to manipulate me emotionally since the financial manipulation didn't work." "And what do you think?" She met my gaze directly for the first time. I think I don't know what to think anymore. Everything's so confused. The server came to take our orders. After she left, Sarah continued, her voice low and strained. After you dissolved the trust fund, everything changed. Daniel's parents suddenly offered to buy us the brownstone, but they would hold the deed until Daniel proved himself at his father's firm. They've taken over every aspect of the wedding down to choosing what jewelry I'll wear. I didn't even select my own wedding dress. Vivian brought in 3 options and told me which one would photograph best with their family colors. That sounds controlling. It is, but whenever I object, they remind me how fortunate I am that they're accepting me into their family despite my modest background. How generous they're being by paying for everything. And Daniel, what does he say about all this? Sarah's expression crumpled slightly. He tells me to just go along with it for now, that once we're married, things will be different. But I'm starting to think they'll never be different. That this is just how it works in their world. Money in exchange for compliance. Is that the world you want to live in? She looked down at her hands. I don't know anymore. I thought the glamour and connections and stability would make me happy. But lately, I just feel lost. Our coffees arrived, creating a momentary pause in the conversation. Sarah wrapped her hands around her mug as if seeking warmth. I keep thinking about what you wrote in your letter, she finally said, about how the trust fund was meant to give me freedom to become my best self. I'm not sure the person I'm becoming is someone either of us would recognize as my best self. It's not too late to change course, Sarah. Isn't it? The wedding is 2 weeks away. Hundreds of invitations have been sent. Daniel's father has invited half of Wall Street. Those are logistics, not life sentences. What matters is what you truly want. I don't even know what I want anymore. A tear slipped down her cheek. I just know that I miss who I used to be. I miss us. I reached across the table and took her hand. I miss us too. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. The wedding arrangements, the way I've treated you, all of it. I got so caught up in becoming what they wanted that I forgot who you raised me to be. The question now is, who do you want to be going forward? Sarah took a deep, shaky breath. I need time to figure that out, but I know I don't want to lose you in the process. Whatever happens with Daniel and the wedding, I need my mom. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not because Sarah might still access the trust fund, or because I might be reinstated as a proper mother of the bride at the wedding, but because beneath the polished exterior she'd adopted, my daughter was still in there, still capable of self-reflection, still able to recognize when something precious was at risk of being lost. You haven't lost me, Sarah. You never will. But I need you to be honest, with yourself most of all, about the life you're choosing and the person you're becoming. She nodded, wiping away tears. I will, I promise. As we finished our coffees, the tension between us didn't fully dissolve, but it had transformed into something more hopeful. A shared acknowledgement that while the path forward wasn't clear, we both wanted to find our way back to each other. What happens now? Sarah asked as we prepared to leave. That's largely up to you. But whatever you decide about the wedding, about Daniel, about your future, I'll be here. Not as a blank check or a silent prop, but as your mother, with all the love and honesty that entails. She hugged me then, a real hug, not the perfunctory embrace I'd grown accustomed to. I've missed you so much, Mom, more than I even realized until now. I've missed you too, sweetheart, the real you. As we parted, I had no idea what Sarah would ultimately decide about her wedding or her relationship with Daniel. But I knew with certainty that whatever came next, it would be her authentic choice, not one coerced by financial pressure from any direction, including mine. And in that moment, I realized that the trust fund had served its purpose after all. Not as a down payment on a brownstone or a safety net for her future, but as a catalyst for something far more valuable, the reclamation of her true self. The week after Sarah's confession at the coffee shop passed in silence. I didn't hear from her, Daniel, or the Harringtons. Each quiet day stretched my nerves further, wondering what decision she would make about the wedding, now just 10 days away. I returned to work, trying to focus on final exams and graduation preparations. My seniors were counting down their last days of high school, their faces alight with anticipation for all that lay ahead. I envied their optimism, their belief that the paths they chose would lead exactly where they intended. Ms. Michaels? Amanda Chen, one of my brightest students, lingered after the bell. Can I talk to you about something? Of course. I gestured to the chair beside my desk. What's on your mind? Amanda twisted the acceptance letter she'd been carrying all week. It's about college. My parents want me to go to Princeton. Because my dad went there, but I really want to study creative writing at Brown. They say writing isn't practical, that I should focus on economics or pre-law. I smiled at the parallel to my own situation with Sarah, parents and children, expectations and independence, the tension between security and authenticity. What does your heart tell you? I asked. That I love writing more than anything, that I'd be miserable studying economics. She looked down at her hands. But I also don't want to disappoint my parents. They've sacrificed so much for me. Parents make sacrifices willingly, Amanda. Not so our children will live the lives we imagine for them, but so they'll have the freedom to discover their own paths. So you think I should choose Brown? I think you should have an honest conversation with your parents about why writing matters to you. Help them understand that the best way to honor their sacrifices is to pursue what truly fulfills you, not what checks the boxes they've created. After Amanda left, I sat at my desk, struck by how easily the advice had flowed when it wasn't my own life in question. Was I being hypocritical? Hadn't I also created expectations for Sarah? Felt betrayed when she chose a path different from what I'd imagined. But it wasn't her different path that hurt. It was how she'd allowed that path to change her core values, how she'd become willing to sideline our relationship for social advancement. My phone chimed with a text notification. Sarah, can you meet me tomorrow after school? Just us. My heart quickened. Of course. My place or somewhere else? Your place. 4:30. The house felt different as I prepared for Sarah's visit. I'd spent the past week continuing my purge of accumulated objects and memories, donating old clothes, rearranging furniture, even painting the dining room, a rich terracotta that Richard would have hated, but that made me smile every time I entered the room. I wasn't trying to erase the past. Rather, I was making space for a future that wasn't entirely defined by my role as Sarah's mother. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The doorbell rang at 4:25. Sarah stood on the porch looking somehow both polished and fragile, like fine china with a hairline crack. She wore a simple sundress rather than her usual designer outfit, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. The house looks different, she remarked as she entered, noticing the rearranged living room. I've been making some changes. I like the new paint color. She paused, taking in more details. You moved Dad's reading chair. I did. It gets better light by the window. Sarah nodded, moving toward the kitchen where tea was already prepared. We settled at the breakfast nook, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows that overlooked the backyard garden where Sarah had once played. I've made a decision, she said after a sip of tea, about the wedding. I kept my expression, neutral, giving her space to continue without revealing my anxiety. I'm postponing it. Of all the possibilities I'd imagined, this wasn't one of them. Postponing, not canceling. I need time, Mom. Time to figure out who I am apart from the Harringtons' expectations. She twisted her engagement ring, which I noticed was now on her right hand instead of her left. Daniel and I had a long talk, several actually. He says he understands and supports my decision, but you're not sure he really does. She smiled sadly. You always could read between my lines. Yes, I think he's expecting this to be temporary, that I'll come to my senses and we'll proceed with a slightly delayed version of the same wedding. What do you think will happen? Sarah looked out at the garden, her expression thoughtful. I honestly don't know. Part of me still loves him. But our conversation at the coffee shop made me realize how much I've changed to fit into his world. I'm not sure if there's a middle ground where I can be authentic and still be what his family expects. Have you told the Harringtons about the postponement? A flash of something, fear, defiance, crossed her face. Daniel did. His mother showed up at my apartment yesterday livid. She said I was being selfish and immature, that everything was already arranged, that important people had adjusted their schedules. What did you say? That I was sorry for the inconvenience, but that I wasn't ready to commit to a lifetime with someone when I felt so uncertain about who I was becoming. Sarah's voice strengthened as she spoke. She threatened to send me a bill for all the non-refundable deposits. I told her to go ahead. Despite everything, I felt a surge of pride. That must have been difficult. Terrifying, actually. Vivian Harrington is used to people falling in line, but something just snapped when she started listing all the important business connections that would be inconvenienced. As if my life decision should revolve around her husband's networking opportunities. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Sarah's decision hanging between us. There's something else, she continued finally. I'm thinking about leaving Lux Media. Because of Daniel? Partly, but also because I'm not sure it's where I belong anymore. The constant pressure to attend the right events, wear the right clothes, cultivate the right connections. It's exhausting. And the actual work is mostly just repackaging affluent lifestyles for people who aspire to them. What would you do instead? I don't know yet. She looked down at her hands. That's why I'm here, actually. I wanted to ask, would it be okay if I came home for a while? Just until I figure things out? The request caught me off guard. Sarah hadn't lived at home since college. Of course you can come home. This will always be your safe place. Even after everything? The way I treated you, the wedding arrangements, all of it? Sarah, you're my daughter. Nothing you do or say changes that. I might not always agree with your choices, but I will always, always want what's best for you. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't deserve you. This isn't about deserving. It's about love. I reached across the table and took her hand. And forgiveness. Both ways. Both ways? I need to apologize too, for dissolving the trust fund without talking to you first. It was a reaction to feeling hurt and powerless. And while I stand by the principle behind it, I should have handled it differently. Sarah squeezed my hand. You were right, though. I was taking you for granted. Taking everything you'd given me for granted. We talked for hours after that, more openly than we had in years. About her relationship with Daniel. About my life after Richard died. About the dreams we'd both deferred or abandoned. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the kitchen, I felt a tentative bridge being rebuilt between us. Not the unquestioning bond of mother and dependent child, but something more nuanced. More equal. I should go, Sarah said eventually, glancing at her watch. I need to pack some things if I'm moving back this weekend. I'll get your room ready. At her confused expression, I added, I may have repurposed it into a home office. But the bed is still there, just surrounded by bookshelves now. She laughed, the sound lighter than I'd heard in months. That's perfect, actually. I have a lot of reading to catch up on. After she left, I stood in the doorway watching her drive away, a complex swirl of emotions in my chest. relief that she was finding her way back to her authentic self, concern about the challenges still ahead. The Harringtons wouldn't accept this postponement quietly, and Daniel might not be as understanding as he claimed. But mostly, I felt gratitude for this unexpected second chance to reconnect with my daughter. The next day, James invited me to dinner. We'd been seeing each other casually for a few weeks. Nothing serious yet, just comfortable evenings of conversation and shared interests. I'd mentioned Sarah's upcoming visit during our last date. "So your daughter's moving home for a while?" he asked as we settled at our favorite table at Riverside Bistro. "How do you feel about that?" "Conflicted," I admitted. Happy to have her home, nervous about navigating a new adult relationship with her. We haven't lived together since she left for college. It'll be an adjustment for both of you. I'm just grateful she felt she could come home. After everything that happened, I wasn't sure we'd find our way back to each other. James studied me across the table, his kind eyes perceptive. "You know, I've known you for what, 5 years now? Since I started teaching at Westlake. And in all that time, I've never seen you as vibrant as you've been these past few weeks." "Vibrant? With everything going on with Sarah?" "Yes, despite that. Or maybe because of it. It's like you've reclaimed something essential about yourself. You're more fully present, more Elaine, rather than just Sarah's mom." His observation startled me. Was it true? Had standing up to Sarah and to myself somehow shifted my energy? "I think I'm learning to balance being a mother with being myself," I said slowly. For so long, those felt like the same thing. But they're not, are they? They shouldn't be. The best parents are whole people with identities beyond their children. "Where was this wisdom when Sarah was growing up?" I teased. "Oh, I'm just repeating what my therapist told me after my divorce." He laughed. "When Katie left for college, I realized I'd defined myself as Katie's dad for so long that I barely knew who James Mercer was anymore." "And who is James Mercer? Beyond an excellent AP history teacher, I mean." His smile widened. "A mediocre guitarist, an enthusiastic hiker, and a man who'd very much like to kiss you right now." The kiss, when it came, felt like another piece of myself falling back into place. A reminder that I was not just a mother, but a woman with desires and a future still unfolding. Sarah moved in that weekend, arriving with 4 suitcases and an air of determined optimism. We established ground rules for our new living arrangement. She would contribute to groceries and household chores. I would respect her privacy. We would both communicate openly rather than letting resentments build. The first few days were awkward but warming, like a house coming to life after a long winter. Sarah slept late, spent hours on her laptop researching job opportunities, and took long walks around the neighborhood. I continued my end-of-year school responsibilities, worked on my novel in the evenings, and tried to give her space to decompress. On her 3rd night home, I found her sitting on the back porch after midnight, wrapped in a blanket despite the mild June air. "Can't sleep?" I asked, sliding into the chair beside her. "Too many thoughts." She stared up at the stars, visible, here in a way they never were in the city. "I got a text from Daniel earlier. He wants to meet." "Are you going to?" "I think I have to. We can't just leave everything hanging indefinitely." "What are you going to tell him?" Sarah sighed, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "That's what's keeping me awake. I've been trying to sort out what I really want versus what I thought I wanted versus what everyone else wants for me." "And what have you concluded?" "That I need to be honest with him, about my doubts, about how I've been losing myself trying to fit into his world." She turned to look at me, her expression vulnerable in the dim porch light. "And that I can't marry someone when I'm still trying to figure out who I am." "That sounds like the right decision, honey. Not an easy one, but the right one." "What if I'm making a huge mistake? Daniel's smart, successful. He comes from a good family. On paper, he's perfect. Life isn't lived on paper, I reminded her gently. It's lived in the small daily choices, in how someone makes you feel about yourself, in whether you can be authentic with them. She nodded slowly. When I'm with him, I'm always performing, always aware of how I'm being perceived. I never just am. That's your answer then. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the chorus of night insects and distant traffic. Mom? Sarah's voice was hesitant. What happened to the trust fund? Really? I'd been expecting this question since she arrived. Part of it went to establish a scholarship at Westlake. Part went into my retirement account. And part... I hesitated. Yes? Part is in a separate account. Not a trust anymore, just a regular investment account. I wasn't ready to let go of the idea of helping you someday, even when I was angriest. Sarah's eyes widened. So there's still some money, yes. Not as much as before, but enough to help you get started wherever you decide to go next. With no strings attached except one, that you use it to build a life that's truly yours, not one designed to impress others. She didn't speak for a long moment, and I worried I'd overstepped. Then she reached over and took my hand. Thank you. Not just for the money, but for believing I'll find my way back to the person you raised me to be. I never doubted it. Not really. The next morning, Sarah left early to meet Daniel at a cafe halfway between our town and the city. She returned hours later, her eyes red, but her shoulders straighter, as if a weight had been lifted. It's over, she said simply as she curled up on the sofa beside me. I gave him back the ring. How did he take it? Better than I expected, actually. I think part of him is relieved. He's been under so much pressure from his parents to follow their life plan. Our relationship was just another checkbox for them. And for him? She considered this. I think he genuinely cared for me, maybe even loved me, but not enough to stand up to his family, not enough to create a life that was truly ours rather than the one they prescribed. I'm sorry, sweetie. Don't be. It hurts now, but it would have hurt so much more later. She leaned her head against my shoulder. The strangest part is, I feel more like myself than I have in years. Like I've been wearing a costume that was getting tighter and tighter, and I've finally taken it off. Freedom often feels that way. Scary, but exhilarating. His mother called while we were still at the cafe. She must have been waiting for his report. Sarah rolled her eyes. She offered to forgive my temporary insanity if I reconsider. When I declined, she suggested I'd never find anyone as good as Daniel again. How gracious of her, I said dryly. I told her that being alone would be better than being with someone who expected me to diminish myself to fit their image. Sarah smiled wryly. I don't think anyone talks to Vivian Harrington that way very often. I wish I could have seen her face. It wasn't pretty. Sarah's smile faded. But the thing is, 6 months ago, I would have caved. I would have apologized and fallen back in line. What changed? You remembered who you are, I said simply. Who you've always been beneath the polished exterior and social climbing. My brave, authentic daughter who knows her own mind. With some help, she added softly. Sometimes we need someone to hold up a mirror so we can see ourselves clearly. Again. The weeks that followed brought a gradual transformation in Sarah. She dyed her expensively highlighted hair back to its natural chestnut brown. She traded designer clothes for comfortable jeans and sweaters. She called her old college friends, reconnecting with people she'd drifted away from during her relationship with Daniel. She also began writing again, something she'd loved in college but abandoned when she joined Lux Media. I would find her at the kitchen table early in the morning, coffee going cold beside her as she typed furiously on her laptop. "What are you working on?" I asked one morning, pouring myself a cup of coffee. She looked up, slightly embarrassed. "A novel, I think. Or maybe just therapy disguised as fiction. It's about a young woman who gets caught up in a world of wealth and status, only to discover it's a gilded cage. Sounds autobiographical. Loosely. Very loosely." She pushed her hair behind her ears, a gesture from childhood that made my heart ache with recognition. "Mostly it's helping me process everything. I'd love to read it when you're ready." "Really? It's pretty rough." "The best first drafts always are." Sarah tilted her head, studying me. "You're different too, you know, since I moved back. More. I don't know. Yourself? Less defined by being my mom." "I'm trying to be. It's a work in progress. I like it. I like seeing you as a whole person, not just as an extension of me. That's how healthy parent-child relationships should evolve," I said. "The harder part is letting your child be a whole person separate from you." She laughed. "You seem to be managing that pretty well, considering I blew up my engagement and career in the span of 2 weeks. Because those were your authentic choices, not reactions to pressure or expectations. That makes all the difference." July brought sweltering heat and a job offer for Sarah, not from another glossy magazine or marketing firm, but from a small educational publishing company specializing in literacy materials for underserved communities. The salary was modest. Compared to Lux Media, the office a converted warehouse rather than a sleek Manhattan high-rise. "I'd be writing content for middle-grade readers," she explained excitedly after her interview. "Stories that reflect diverse experiences, that help kids see themselves in literature. It's not glamorous, but it feels meaningful." "It sounds perfect for you." "The commute would be manageable from here, but eventually I'd want my own place again. Closer to their offices." I nodded, ignoring the small twinge at the thought of her leaving again so soon. "That makes sense." She hesitated, then asked, "Would that money you mentioned, the part of the trust fund you kept separate, would that be available for a security deposit and first month's rent? I've been saving from my freelance work, but city apartments require so much up front." "Of course. That's exactly what it's there for, helping you build a life that aligns with your values." Sarah accepted the job, and we spent August hunting for an apartment she could afford on her new salary. We found a tiny but charming one-bedroom in a diverse neighborhood near her new office. Nothing like the luxury brownstone she'd almost purchased with Daniel, but with character and potential. As we painted the walls of her new apartment a warm butter yellow, Sarah shared her developing plans. "I'm going to join a local writing group, and maybe volunteer at the literacy center down the street. And there's a community garden with plots, available next spring. Sounds like you're creating a full life." I realized something after everything that happened. With Daniel, I was always focused on the next achievement, the next status symbol. I was never just living in the present moment, appreciating what I already had. That's a powerful lesson to learn so young. I had a good teacher. She bumped her shoulder against mine, leaving a smudge of yellow paint on my shirt. "Sorry about that." "It'll wash out." I studied her face, flushed with exertion and purpose. "You look happy, Sarah. Genuinely happy." "I am. Not all the time. I still have moments where I miss the shiny life I thought I wanted. But mostly, I feel like I'm building something real. Something that's uniquely mine." The day Sarah moved into her new apartment coincided with the first day of my fall semester at Westlake. After helping her arrange furniture and unpack kitchen essentials, I prepared to drive back home, knowing I needed to finalize lesson plans for the next morning. "I think that's everything essential," I said, surveying the small but now homey space. "You can always come back for the rest of your things when you have time." "Thanks for everything, Mom. Not just today, but everything. We stood facing each other in her tiny kitchen, the afternoon light casting warm patterns through the curtainless windows. So much had changed between us in just a few months. Pain weathered, truths spoken, bridges rebuilt. I should get going. First day of school tomorrow. Sarah nodded, then impulsively pulled me into a tight hug. I've been thinking about something you said back when all this started. About authentic gifts and their conditions. What about it? You said the trust fund was a gift you intended to give me under certain conditions. Primarily that I would become the kind of person who deserved it. She pulled back to look at me. At the time, I thought you were being controlling, using money to manipulate me. But I understand now. The condition wasn't about specific actions or choices. It was about integrity, about being true to myself and the values you raised me with. That's exactly right. I'm still learning what that means, being authentically me in a world that's constantly pushing us all to be someone else. But I'm getting better at it, and I wanted you to know. I'm grateful you canceled that trust fund. It was the wake-up call I needed. I touched her cheek gently. And I'm grateful you were brave enough to hear it, even though it hurt at first. Not everyone would have had that courage. As I drove home to my emptier but somehow fuller house, I reflected on the strange, painful, beautiful journey of the past few months. Sarah was finding her way forward with clearer eyes and stronger boundaries. I was reclaiming pieces of myself that had been submerged in motherhood for decades, writing again, dating James more seriously, even considering a sabbatical to finish my novel. The trust fund I'd so carefully built and then deliberately dismantled had served its true purpose. After all, not as financial security or a down payment on a house, but as the catalyst for us both to recognize a fundamental truth: that genuine love comes with the courage to see each other clearly, even when that vision is uncomfortable. That the most valuable inheritance I could give my daughter wasn't money or status or security, but the example of a woman who refused to be diminished and who wouldn't let her daughter be diminished either. 2 weeks later, I received a package at school. Inside was a framed quotation in Sarah's distinctive handwriting. The most authentic gift is not one that creates obligation, but one that offers freedom. Freedom to become your truest self, even when that self surprises everyone, including you. Below it, she'd written, "To Mom, who taught me what real wealth looks like. Love, Sarah." I placed it on my desk where my students could see it, hoping that some of them might absorb its wisdom long before they needed it. And each time I glanced at it between classes, I was reminded that sometimes the most loving thing we can do, for our children and for ourselves, is to recognize when a dream has become a cage and have the courage to open the door. Autumn arrived with a crisp certainty, painting Lakeside in brilliant reds and golds. It had been 3 months since Sarah moved back to her apartment closer to her new job. 3 months of rebuilding her life piece by authentic piece. My relationship with James had deepened over those same months. We'd settled into a comfortable rhythm of shared dinners, weekend hikes, and quiet evenings discussing books or planning lessons. He'd helped me transform Sarah's old bedroom into a proper writing studio, building bookshelves along one wall and finding a vintage desk at an estate sale that fit perfectly beneath the window. "You're really doing it," he remarked one evening as he examined the stacks of manuscript pages on my desk. "Writing that novel you've talked about for years." "Trying to," I admitted. "It's harder than I expected, finding the right words. But you're showing up for it. That's what matters." He was right. Whether the novel was ever published didn't matter as much as the fact that I was finally honoring that long-deferred part of myself. Like Sarah, I was reclaiming pieces I'd set aside for too long. My phone chimed with a text from Sarah. "Big news. Can I come for dinner tomorrow night?" I replied immediately, "Of course. 7 p.m.? Perfect. I'll bring dessert." When I mentioned Sarah's impending visit to James, he offered to make himself scarce. You two should have time alone if she has news to share. Actually, I said, surprising myself, I'd like you to be there, if you want to be, that is. His smile was warm. I'd like that very much. Sarah arrived the next evening carrying a bakery box and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. She hugged me tightly, then greeted James with genuine warmth. I hope it's okay that I asked James to join us, I said, as we moved into the dining room where I'd set the table for 3. More than okay, Sarah assured me. Actually, my news involves multiple people, so having James here makes sense. We settled around the table, passing dishes of roasted chicken and seasonal vegetables. Sarah waited until we'd all served ourselves before she set down her fork and took a deep breath. I've been promoted, she announced, her eyes bright, to senior content developer, after only 3 months. Sarah, that's wonderful. I reached across to squeeze her hand. I'm so proud of you. Congratulations, James added. That must be some kind of record. It's because of a project I pitched. A series of early reader books featuring characters from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. Kids who live in apartments instead of houses, who have parents working multiple jobs, who might not have the latest gadgets but have rich, meaningful lives. The passion in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't the polished enthusiasm she'd displayed when talking about her work at Lux Media. This was genuine, deeply felt purpose. The first books will be released next spring, and the best part is I'll be the lead writer for the entire series. That's incredible, honey. You've found your calling. I think I have, she agreed, but that's not all my news. She paused, suddenly looking nervous. I've been seeing someone. Oh? I kept my tone carefully neutral, remembering how quick I'd been to judge Daniel. His name is Michael. He's an illustrator at the publishing house. She twisted her napkin slightly. He's nothing like Daniel. No family fortune, no connections. Just a talented artist with student loans and a tiny apartment in Queens that he shares with 2 roommates. He sounds lovely, I said sincerely. Will we get to meet him? That's what I wanted to ask, actually. Would it be okay if I brought him to Thanksgiving? It's still a month away, so if you'd rather I didn't... Of course you can bring him, I interrupted. We'd love to meet him, wouldn't we, James? Absolutely. The more the merrier. Sarah's smile was radiant. Thank you. I wasn't sure. After everything with Daniel and the Harringtons, I wasn't sure you'd want to meet anyone I was dating for a long time. Sarah, I said gently, I never objected to Daniel because of who he was. I objected to how being with him changed you. If Michael makes you happy and helps you be more authentically yourself, I'll be delighted to meet him. After dinner, while James and Sarah were engaged in a spirited debate about historical fiction, I slipped into the kitchen to prepare coffee. Standing at the counter, listening to their laughter drift in from the dining room, I felt a profound sense of rightness. Life had taken unexpected turns, painful ones at times, but we had all somehow arrived at this moment of genuine connection. Sarah appeared in the doorway carrying dessert plates. Need help? I'm just getting coffee started. She set the plates in the sink and leaned against the counter. You look happy, Mom. I am. James is good for you. He is. He sees me, all of me, not just the mother parts. You deserve that. She hesitated, then added, I need to tell you something else, something I've been thinking about for a while. What is it? I've decided not to touch that money you set aside, the remainder of the trust fund. Her statement caught me off guard. But Sarah, that money is for you, to help you establish yourself. I know, and I'm incredibly grateful. But I need to do this on my own, to know that whatever I build is because of my own efforts, not because I had a financial cushion others don't have. I studied her face, seeing the determination there. Are you sure? There's no shame in accepting help. I'm sure. Keep it in that separate account. Maybe someday I'll need it for something truly important. Graduate school or a house when I'm ready, or who knows. But for now, I want to make my own way. I'm proud of you, Sarah. That's a mature decision. I learned from the best. She smiled, then grew serious again. There's something else I've been thinking about. Something I want to share with you. What's that? I've been journaling about everything that happened with Daniel, with his family, with us. About how easily I lost myself trying to become what others expected. I've been thinking about turning it into a book. Not a revenge tell-all or anything like that, but a memoir about identity and authenticity, about the pressure on young women to conform to others' expectations. That sounds powerful. Have you started writing it? Just notes so far. I wanted to talk to you first, since you're a big part of the story. I'd never include anything that made you uncomfortable. I was touched by her consideration. I trust you to tell your truth, Sarah, including the parts where I made mistakes. There would definitely be a chapter about how canceling my trust fund was the most loving thing you could have done, even though it didn't feel that way at the time. Write your story, sweetheart. The full, complicated, beautiful truth of it. I'll be your biggest supporter. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were filled with small, meaningful moments. Sarah and Michael came for dinner several times, and I watched with quiet joy as she relaxed completely in his presence. There was none of the performative quality that had characterized her relationship with Daniel. With Michael, Sarah laughed freely, disagreed openly, and showed all the quirky, thoughtful sides of herself I'd feared were lost. Michael was indeed nothing like Daniel. He wore thrift store sweaters instead of tailored suits, had wild, curly hair that constantly fell in his eyes, and spoke passionately about art education in public schools. He treated Sarah with a gentle respect that never veered into reverence or control, and he asked me thoughtful questions about my teaching and writing that showed genuine interest. "He's the real deal," James commented after their third visit. "No agenda, no pretense." "I think so too," I agreed. "You should see how he looks at her when she's talking. Like he can't believe his luck." "I know that look," James said, his eyes crinkling. "It's the same way I look at you." On a chilly Saturday in early November, Sarah called with an unexpected request. "Mom, can I ask a huge favor? Michael and I are looking at an apartment tomorrow, and I'd really value your opinion on it." "Of course, but why my opinion specifically?" "Because you've always had good instincts about places. Remember how you knew our house was the one the minute you walked in, even though Dad thought it needed too much work?" The memory made me smile. Richard had been concerned about the outdated kitchen and single bathroom, but I'd fallen in. Love with the garden and the light that streamed through the windows. I'd been right. It had become a wonderful home. "Besides," Sarah continued, "this would be our first place together. Michael's moving out of his shared apartment, and my lease is up in January. It's a big step, and I'd like your blessing." "You have my blessing regardless, but I'm happy to look at the apartment with you." The next day, I met Sarah and Michael outside a pre-war building in a diverse neighborhood in Queens. The apartment was on the third floor, a one-bedroom with high ceilings, original moldings, and windows that faced a quiet courtyard. "What do you think?" Sarah asked, watching my face as I explored the small but charming space. "It has wonderful bones," I said truthfully. "And great light. Those windows are spectacular." "The kitchen's tiny," Michael acknowledged, "but we thought we could put a small island there for more counter space." "And we'd have to repaint," Sarah added. "The current color is a bit intense." The walls were indeed a startling shade of mustard yellow, but I could easily envision the space transformed with a softer palette. "It feels right," I said, watching them exchange glances. "I can see you both here." After signing the rental application, we celebrated with lunch at a nearby cafe. As we were finishing our meal, Sarah's phone chimed with a notification. She glanced at it, her expression shifting subtly. "Everything okay?" I asked. "It's just an email from Vivian Harrington." "Daniel's mother? What does she want?" Sarah hesitated, glancing at Michael. "She's been reaching out occasionally, inviting me to lunch, sending links to job opportunities at companies where they have connections. This time, she's inviting me to their annual Christmas gala." "Are you going to go?" Michael asked, his tone neutral but his eyes watchful. "No," Sarah said firmly. "I've declined all her invitations so far, but she's persistent." "Why do you think she keeps reaching out?" I asked, curious about Vivian's motivation after her initial anger over the canceled wedding. "I think she genuinely liked the idea of me as Daniel's wife. She'd invested a lot in grooming me for that role." Sarah shrugged. "Or maybe she's hoping I'll change my mind. Daniel's still single from what I hear." "Have you heard from him directly?" "He texted on my birthday. Very formal, very distant. I responded politely but briefly. I think we've both moved on." She reached for Michael's hand across the table. "I know I have." As we walked back to our cars, Sarah linked her arm through mine, holding me back slightly as Michael walked ahead. "I've been thinking about the money again," she said quietly. "The trust fund?" "Yes. I still don't want to use it for myself, but I had an idea." "What would you think about using it to start a foundation? Something that provides arts education grants to public schools like Westlake?" The suggestion took me by surprise. "That's a wonderful idea, but it's your money, Sarah. Are you sure that's how you want to use it?" "Completely sure. I've been talking with Michael about his experiences growing up in a school with no arts funding. How different his path might have been if he'd had access to proper materials and instruction earlier. And I keep thinking about what you always taught me, that true wealth isn't about what you accumulate, but what you share." I squeezed her arm, too moved to speak for a moment. "We could do it together," I finally said. "Set up the foundation. I mean, I could help during summer breaks." "I'd like that," Sarah smiled. "A mother-daughter project that gives back to the community. Let's talk to Teresa about setting it up properly after the holidays." Thanksgiving arrived with a light dusting of early snow that transformed Lakeside into a picture-perfect New England scene. I'd invited Janet and her husband, along with James's daughter Katie, who was home from college, creating the largest holiday gathering my house had seen in years. Sarah and Michael arrived early to help with preparations. As I watched her confidently organizing the kitchen, delegating tasks, and laughing easily with everyone, I marveled at the transformation of the past year. The daughter who had once been ashamed to introduce me to her fiancé was now proudly integrating our family traditions with her new relationship. During dinner, James proposed a toast. "To found family," he said, raising his glass. "To the people we choose and the people who choose us again and again, even when it's complicated." "To second chances," Janet added. "To authenticity," Sarah contributed, her eyes meeting mine across the table. "To trust," I finished, "in ourselves and in each other." Later, as the evening wound down and people began gathering their coats, Sarah pulled me into a quiet corner. "I have something for you," she said, handing me a small wrapped package. "I wasn't going to give it to you until Christmas, but it feels right to do it now." Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant, a tree with spreading branches. "It's a family tree," Sarah explained. "Not just for blood relations, but for the people who truly see us and love us anyway. The jeweler can add more, branches as our family grows." I touched the pendant gently, understanding the symbolism. "It's beautiful, Sarah. Thank you." "I want you to know something, Mom. When I look back at everything that happened, the trust fund, the wedding, all of it, I don't see it as a crisis anymore. I see it as the most important reset of my life. You loved me enough to let me go so I could find my way back to myself. That's what real love is," I told her. Not possession or control, but the courage to hold space for someone to become their authentic self, even when it's painful. "I've started the memoir," she confided. "The working title is The Trust Fund: What Money Can't Buy. I can't wait to read it." After all our guests had departed, I stood in my kitchen surveying the remnants of the feast: empty plates, crumpled napkins, half-empty wine glasses. Evidence of a home filled with genuine connection. My phone pinged with a message from Sarah. "Got home safe. Thank you for today, for everything. Love you." I smiled as I typed back, "Love you too." More than any trust fund could ever measure. The next morning, I woke early and padded into my writing studio with a cup of coffee. The first snow of the season was falling silently outside, coating the world in pristine white. I opened my laptop and began typing the story that had been forming in my heart for months. Not the novel I'd been working on, but something new. A memoir of my own. I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who would cancel her daughter's trust fund, I wrote. I was the woman who packed heart-shaped notes in lunchboxes, who stayed up until 3 a.m. finishing science fair projects, who worked 3 jobs so my daughter could take piano lessons. I was the perpetual giver, the eternal supporter, the safety net that never failed. Until the day my daughter decided I wasn't good enough to be seen at her wedding. This is the story of what happened next, how losing what I thought was most precious helped me find what truly mattered. How my daughter and I both discovered that the greatest inheritance isn't money or status or security, but the courage to live authentically, even when it costs us something. Especially then. As the snow continued to fall, I typed steadily, letting the full, complicated truth flow onto the page. There was no guarantee anyone would ever read these words besides me, but that wasn't the point. The writing itself was an act of reclamation, of my story, my voice, my place in the world beyond the roles that had defined me for so long. Later that day, a text arrived from Sarah with a photo attached. She and Michael standing in front of their soon-to-be apartment building, grinning broadly. Application approved, moving in January 15th. Can we borrow your painting supplies? I smiled, typing back. Of course, and I have some curtains that might work for those beautiful windows. That evening, James came over with takeout and a bottle of wine. As we settled on the sofa, he noticed my laptop open to the memoir draft. You started a new project, he observed, reading the first paragraph visible on the screen. This looks different from your novel. It is. It's my story. Ours. Mine and Sarah's. Are you planning to publish it? I don't know yet. Maybe. Mostly, I'm writing it for myself, to make sense of everything that happened, to honor the journey. James nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. Speaking of journeys, he said, his voice taking on a slightly nervous quality, I've been thinking about ours. Oh? He set down his wine glass and took my hands in his. Elaine, this past year with you has been the happiest of my life. Watching you reclaim your identity beyond being Sarah's mother, seeing you pursue your writing, being part of your expanding definition of family, it's been extraordinary. My heart quickened as I realized where this conversation was heading. I'm not proposing, he said quickly, reading my expression. Not yet anyway, but I wanted to ask how you'd feel about us taking the next step, about me selling my condo and us finding a place together, something that would be ours from the beginning, not my space or your space, but our space. The question hung between us, full of possibility. A year ago, I might have hesitated, might have wondered how Sarah would react, might have been fearful of further change. But the woman I'd become, the woman who had learned to prioritize authenticity over accommodation, truth over comfort, knew exactly what she wanted. Yes, I said simply. I'd like that very much. His smile was radiant. I was hoping you'd say that. I've already started looking at listings. There's a craftsman bungalow near the lake that I think you'd love. It has a sunroom that would make a perfect writing studio. When can we see it? I scheduled a viewing for tomorrow afternoon. Is that too soon? Not at all. I leaned in to kiss him, feeling the rightness of this new chapter unfolding. After everything I've learned this year, I'm done putting life on hold. Later that night, after James had gone home, I stood at my bedroom window watching the snow illuminate the darkness. I thought about the journey of the past year, how what had begun as a painful exclusion had led to the most profound inclusion of my authentic self in my own life. The trust fund I'd built for Sarah had been intended as a gift of security, a foundation for her future. In dissolving it, I'd given her something far more valuable, the opportunity to discover her own worth beyond financial inheritance, beyond social status, beyond the expectations of others. And in the process, I'd given myself the same gift. Tomorrow, I would view a potential new home with James. In January, I would help Sarah and Michael settle into their first apartment together. In the spring, we would launch a foundation to bring arts education to underserved schools. And throughout it all, I would continue writing my story, not as Sarah's mother or Richard's widow or James's partner, though I was all of those things, but as Elaine Michaels, a woman who had finally learned that the most authentic life is the one lived from the inside out, not the outside in. The trust fund was gone, but the trust, in myself, in my daughter, in the power of genuine connection, had never been stronger. And that, I now understood, was the only inheritance that truly mattered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.